For years we've heard calls to a return to tradition as a solution for cultural decay. Right-wing commentators insist that by reviving the past, we can restore meaning and excellence. Meanwhile, many on the left dismiss tradition altogether, claiming it's outdated or oppressive. But the right doesn't seem to understand what actually made the past cultures great, and the left thinks that the construction of the past or the demonizing of past figures is somehow progress.
Today I have a presentation on dynasties. But I refuse to talk about the ancient history and drama. That's just the patriarchy. Instead, I'm going to talk about a dynasty that I actually look up to. An all-women dynasty. Women of color. Gay women. A dynasty that makes Alexander the Great look like Alexander the... Okay.
Look around. Our modern culture is a wasteland. Hollywood pumps out lifeless sequels, reboots, and corporate-approved stories with little to no depth. Art is almost non-existent. How many of us can call a modern-day man an artist that can paint or sculpt something beautiful out of stone? Music almost seems designed to go viral as a dance on TikTok, or to push a certain message that fits the modern-day agenda, rather than to move the soul. And obviously, there is still good music being made today, but I'm referring to music that is being pushed onto us by the media, or like the music that gets awards at the Grammys. Literature has been replaced by self-improvement slop made by gurus who would sell their own mothers if they could for a quick buck. And universities are more concerned with deconstructing past achievements than creating new ones. High culture is dead, and all we're left with is a never-ending cycle of shallow entertainment and performative intellectualism. High culture isn't about preserving the past, nor is it about destroying it. It's about creating something so great it will outlast us all. It's about willing to sacrifice as a collective to bring on something new. The ancient Greeks understood this, which is why their civilization produced some of the most profound art, philosophy, literature, and history. They balanced discipline and creativity, order and chaos. It feels like now we have lost this Apollonian and Dionysian balance. We only see people on the extreme of each spectrum. So, how did we go from the Odyssey to Captain America Brave New World? In this video, I'll be discussing how we can revive high culture, especially in the media we produce and consume, and whether we're truly on the verge of a new golden era, as many on the right claim. But most importantly, I'll break down why past attempts to restore cultural greatness have failed and what we need to do differently this time. Before we continue, I want to make one thing clear. The modern world isn't bad just because it's modern. In fact, in many ways, life today is far better than in previous eras. But just because things are better now doesn't mean they couldn't be even better. We should be able to criticize what's broken, take inspiration from the past, and build upon what actually worked, keeping the good and leaving the bad. Which is why, if you want to understand what high culture is, we have to look at a civilization that has previously mastered it. The ancient Greeks. Their artistic and intellectual achievements didn't happen by accident. They didn't sit around complaining about cultural decay or fantasizing about the past. They created something new by smashing two raw forces together, the Apollonian and the Dionysian. Friedrich Nietzsche, in The Birth of Tragedy, argued that Greek culture thrived because it embraced the Apollonian order and the Dionysian chaos. The Apollonian represents rationality, structure, beauty, and restraint. It's the force behind philosophy, mathematics, architecture, and logic, the things that give civilization form. The Dionysian represents raw passion, ecstasy, suffering, and primal energy. It's the force behind music, dance, myth, and tragic storytelling, the things that give civilization soul. The Greeks didn't treat these forces as enemies, they fused them together to create something sublime. Greek tragedy was a brutal confrontation with suffering, destiny, and the limits of human power. It wasn't made to entertain the masses or to push propaganda, it was made to expose the raw truth of existence. Take Oedipus Rex, for example. Oedipus, a noble king, tries to escape fate, only to fall into exactly the destiny he feared, murdering his father and marrying his mother. There is no happy ending, no moral lesson about self-improvement, it's just a cruel reality that Oedipus must face. Or take the Bacchae, where the king who denies Dionysian chaos is literally torn apart by his own mother in a frenzy. These stories weren't safe and they weren't designed to make the audience feel good. They forced them to reckon with reality. Compare that to modern entertainment. Today's stories are either sanitized and predictable or so deconstructed that they lose all meaning. Take modern Hollywood, where every movie follows the same lifeless formula, where every character has to be likable, relatable, and self-aware. They never take themselves or their mission seriously. They're always in this smug, winking tone like, look at me, I am above this. The writing feels condescending, afraid of sincerity, as if genuine heroism or struggle is something to be mocked. And yes, I can already hear some of you saying, you're just not looking for the right movies. And trust me, I know there are some great niche films out there, but I'm not talking about rare outliers. I'm talking about the average film, the ones that define mainstream culture. And the reality is, those films are soulless, formulaic, and terrified of anything truly profound. And where are the tragic endings? They're almost non-existent. Even in so-called dark films, suffering is either sanitized or turned into an aesthetic mystery porn, devoid of the raw, transcendent quality that made Greek tragedy so powerful. But then, something changed. Socrates and the rise of rationalism tipped the scales. Plato sneered at art, calling it a liar's game next to pure truth. The Dionysian spirit got castrated, and with it, the creative spark of Greek culture began to fade. Whenever cultural decay is discussed, the right answer is almost always the same. Return to tradition. They romanticize the past, believing that if we just bring back traditional values, everything will magically fix itself. But the truth is, most of these people have no idea what made tradition work in the first place. When the right talks about tradition, what are they talking about? Most of the time it boils down to surface level aesthetics and obsession with moral purity, but this is just a shell of tradition, not its core. The great civilizations of the past weren't great because they blindly preserved tradition. They were great because they built upon tradition and created new expressions of excellence. Take the Renaissance as an example. It didn't just revive Greek and Roman art, it innovated upon it, pushing paintings, sculptures, and architecture to new heights. If the Renaissance artists had simply copied the Greeks, we wouldn't have Michelangelo, Raphael, or Leonardo da Vinci. True high culture evolves, it doesn't just repeat. Modern traditionalists don't understand this. Instead of striving for new greatness, they settle for nostalgia. The problem with returning to tradition is that tradition isn't enough, and only traditional culture is a dead culture. Why? Because tradition alone does not create. Creation is what sustains tradition. Look at ancient Rome. At its peak, it was a thriving empire that embraced philosophy, architecture, military power, and artistic expression. But as Rome declined, its leaders became obsessed with preserving traditions rather than adapting it. Laws got stricter, temples got holier, and it still crumbled. They tried to enforce outdated laws, clinging to dying institutions, and restore a past that no longer fit the reality of their world. Right-wing traditionalists want to revive the West, but how do they plan to do it? By demanding people to adapt lifestyles that don't fit modern conditions, by complaining about cultural decay without actually creating anything, by endlessly rewatching Gladiator and Braveheart while failing to produce a single work of art or literature that rivals the past. And to be fair, the right does recognize some of the problems plaguing modern culture. They are right to criticize the emptiness of postmodern deconstruction, the loss of beauty in art, and the erosion of meaning in entertainment. But spotting the corpse does not make you a doctor. You don't revive high culture by screaming, "Go back." You revive it by creating something so powerful, so meaningful, so excellent that it naturally becomes tradition. You don't preserve greatness, you surpass it. The same people saying reject modernity, embrace tradition, are the ones who spend hours scrolling through TikTok and doom posting on Twitter. They consume the very system they claim to be against. The truth is, modern traditionalists don't want a cultural revival. They want nostalgia. They want the illusion of tradition without doing the work the real high culture requires. If traditionalists were serious about saving culture, they wouldn't be obsessed with preserving old greatness, they'd be creating new greatness. Traditionalists aren't wrong because tradition sucks. They're wrong because they don't get it. Tradition is a launch pad, not a museum. You don't crawl back to it, you leap forward from it. While traditionalists at least claim to want a cultural revival, the modern left doesn't even pretend to care. Instead of striving for high culture, they attack it. Instead of creating great art, they deconstruct it. Instead of promoting excellence, they settle for mediocrity and call it progress. And the result? A culture that actively destroys its own potential. Modern left-wing culture is built on an obsession with inclusivity, deconstruction, and subversion. At its core, this worldview rejects hierarchy, merit, and pursuit of greatness, the very things that make high culture possible. Art has abandoned skill. Classical painters spent decades mastering techniques, while today's art world celebrates incoherent scribbles and digital garbage because skill is oppressive. Literature has abandoned depth. We went from Homer and Dante to young adult novels where identity politics matter more than storytelling. Music has abandoned emotion. Beethoven created symphonies that shook the soul. Today, mainstream music is algorithm-generated noise designed for TikTok trends. Cinema has abandoned storytelling. Instead of powerful narratives, we get movies that are just shallow vehicles for political messaging or lazy subversions of better works. Everything today is either a lifeless corporate product or a self-aware parody of something better. For example, look at how modern filmmakers approach legendary stories. Instead of crafting new myths, they just take existing classics and subvert them into ironic, deconstructed trash. Every reboot and sequel is made with a smug, self-aware wink, like look at me, look how stupid the past was. We are so much smarter now. But the truth is, great art is not ironic, great art is not ashamed of itself. The Greeks didn't write the Iliad just to subvert it. Shakespeare didn't write Hamlet with a wink to the audience. Dostoevsky didn't write Crime and Punishment as a joke. Great works of art took themselves seriously because they were grappling with profound truths. Meanwhile, modern culture is too cowardly to believe in anything at all. If traditionalists are obsessed with preserving the past, then the modern left is obsessed with tearing it down. Universities no longer teach the classics. They attack them as problematic relics of the past. High art is dismissed as elitist because it requires skill and dedication. Masculine heroism and storytelling is ridiculed as toxic. Beauty in art is rejected in favor of ugliness because beauty is a social construct. What happened to the idea that culture should elevate us, that art should inspire us to be better, that philosophy should challenge us to think deeper? Instead of striving for greatness, today's culture glorifies victimhood and celebrates mediocrity. Everything today is filtered through the lens of nothing actually matters. Art is no longer about truth, it's about interpretation. Beauty is no longer about transcendence, it's about subjectivity. Stories are no longer about universal human struggles, they are about politics, gender, race, and power dynamics. Why grind for excellence if it's oppressive? Why craft beauty if it's fake? Why tell epic tales if truth is a lie? This is cultural suicide, convincing us nothing great is worth making. Here's where it gets even more crazy. While leftists claim to hate tradition, they still rely on it. They reject Western philosophy but still use Socratic logic to argue their points. They say old myths are outdated but can't stop making bad reboots of them now. To be fair, the left does have one point. Stagnation is dangerous. Culture should never be frozen in time. High culture should evolve. But what they fail to understand is that deconstruction is not evolution. The Renaissance didn't destroy Greek and Roman art, it built upon it. The Romantic movement didn't erase classical ideas, it reinterpreted them with new energy. Even Nietzsche, one of the fiercest critics of tradition, didn't call for the blind rejection. He called for a new affirmation of life. The left is right. The culture must grow, but it cannot grow if it refuses to believe in greatness. Both the left and the right have failed, but for different reasons. The right clings on to a dead past, failing to create anything new. The left rejects greatness entirely, leaving nothing to build upon. Both paths lead to cultural death. Truth is, we don't need to return to the past or destroy it. We need to create something greater than anything has come before. And until we regain the spirit of high adventure and relentless action, the force that turns nations of stones and sticks into empires of marble, our culture will remain trapped, too weak to build, too cowardly to believe. The past is gone and we can't return to it, but I refuse to stand by and watch modern culture decay without doing anything about it. And I know many of you watching feel the same. I refuse to believe that we're living in the end of history, that nothing significant will ever happen again, simply because democracy has made people too comfortable. I reject the black pill mindset, a defeatism that says we're doomed to stagnation, and I rebuke any accelerationist philosophy that claims civilization is beyond saving and that we should just intensify its collapse to force a new social order. If history really is cyclical, if civilizations truly rise and fall, then why can't we be the exception? Why can't we be the ones who break the cycle, who see the errors of the past and build something greater? Why should we resign ourselves to decline when we have the power to create? We are not just passengers in history, we are its architects. If we refuse to build, then we deserve to fall. So, if you're an artist, paint something that forces people to feel again. If you're a writer, write stories to shake people to its core. If you're a musician, create something that stirs the soul. If you're a thinker, revive philosophy that challenges people to transcend themselves. This is how high culture is reborn, not by begging for it, not by waiting for someone else to fix it, but by creating something so undeniable, so excellent, so great it becomes tradition on its own. The Greeks didn't wait for permission to build their civilizations, they forged it. The Renaissance wasn't given to the world, it was created by men who refused to accept mediocrity. The Romantics didn't sit around complaining about the Enlightenment, they fought back with art, music, and literature that could not be ignored. This is our task now, to create something greater than what came before. But let's be honest, most people won't do anything. Most people will close this video, scroll to the next piece of content, and forget everything they just heard. Most people will continue consuming the same garbage, complaining about the same problems and waiting for someone else to fix them. But these people will not be part of the next cultural renaissance. Only the ones who create will be, only the ones who struggle will be, and only the ones who believe in greatness will be. So ask yourself, are you going to be part of the rebirth of high culture, or are you just going to be another spectator watching from the sidelines? The choice is yours.
But if your dream still lives, if that castle still gleams just as brightly in your eyes, then it is your obligation to lay the stones that surround you now.